Steven Spielberg is one of, if not the most influential director of all time. From massive blockbusters to his more heartfelt and personal stories, Spielberg is a wizard in the film industry and needs no introduction whatsoever. When it comes to his movies, while some of them are highly praised and remembered and loved, some are forgotten about when you mention his name and are arguably some of his best movies in my opinion. Ones like War Horse, The Terminal, Always, and of course, The Adventures of Tintin. Tintin is one of the most popular European comics that his influences spread across everywhere. It's also one of the oldest, first being published back in 1929, making it almost 100 years old at this time. Tintin is a series I was not entirely aware of until the 2011 movie. When I saw it in the theater, I instantly became a fan. My dad had to drag me to this movie because, honestly, I didn't know if it was going to be good or not, but frankly, this became one of my favorite movies when I was a child, and I honestly just became a fan of Tintin right after that. I was renting out the comics, I was going to the library constantly trying to find all the issues. I watched the 1958 and the 1991 cartoons, as well as the 5 films that tried to capture Hergé's world, but they never really came close in my opinion. While some stuff would work, like the voices, or for instance even in the 1991 animated series, it looked very similar to the comic book artwork. The best way to describe Tintin is really like Indiana Jones for kids. There's always some MacGuffin or mystery that surrounds the entire story that's being told. The way that Hergé wrote and illustrated his characters were so entertaining. You could easily fill in the blanks between the pages. My favorites were always Thompson and Thompson, the two incompetent detectives who are always being bumbling idiots.
Great Scotland Yard! That's extraordinary!
What is?
Worthington's have a half-price sale on bowler hats.
Tintin is a series that I've been a fan of now for the last 15 years almost, and honestly, it's something that I come back to regularly. For a long-time fan of the series, I can't imagine what they thought of the movie here. For me, I consider it one of Spielberg's best movies that he's ever directed, and makes me wonder why he's not done more cartoons. While Spielberg has always had his hand in some kids' properties, such as his own directed movie Hook or E.T., he has been an executive producer on a lot of children's cartoons. But other than Tintin, he has never directed another one. Not to say that Tintin is childish, because it does get away with a lot for a recent PG rating, but the way that The Adventures of Tintin is shot and directed is amazing, and it takes full advantage of his cartoony world. It can be a grounded movie at times, but it's never afraid to have the wacky antics that have its characters look like they were ripped from a Looney Tunes short. The thing about movies that usually is one of the most important things that usually never gets discussed about a lot is its editing and its transitions. That's so important to movies. When a movie has poor editing or transitions, it can suck you right out of the world that has been built up. It's not just an action scene. 2 people talking can have poor editing and have way too many cuts.
I think we'll go for it.
For instance, there's a scene in the movie where Tintin is first introduced to the character Captain Haddock. The scene is about 2.5 minutes long, and it only contains 8 cuts. There is a lot going on in this scene, from the introduction to the main character, a sword fight, and a complex background that tells the story of Haddock, and it all is contained in 8 cuts.
Oh, you thought you could sneak in behind me and catch me with my trousers down, huh?
There's another scene later on that's an action set piece that's a one-shot take. This is one of my favorite shots of all time, and it lasts roughly 4 minutes, and it's just beautiful. The scene starts at the top of this dam that's blown up, and the main characters have to rush to get to the bottom of it, and along the way they have every wacky scenario that occurs, from a tank driving through a hotel, Snowy launching himself with a hawk, and Tintin driving a motorcycle through a building that's all crumbling around him. The whole scene is incredible.
Did you hit anything?
Oh dear.
Editing is something I usually don't gush about, but in all honesty, the transitions that this movie makes are astounding. One of my favorite shots is when Haddock and Tintin are stuck in the Sahara, and he's recounting the tale of Sir Francis Haddock, and the tale begins to morph into the scene. The same details I mentioned before about cuts applies to this whole scene as well. Long takes and wide shots. You miss none of the action and understand everything that is occurring. I think the thing though that elevates this movie a lot is the score. John Williams is here, and it's more of a subtle that he's doing than these big sweeping scores. They're in here, but most of the soundtrack is little musical motifs that slowly build over time.
The process of making those films is something quite different. We recorded some of the music early on when the graphics were just beginning to be drawn, and what I actually hoped to try to do was in some of the action sequences to create maybe what is an old Disney technique of doing the music first and then have the animators animate to the silhouette of what the music is doing.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. If a movie has a poor story or poor characters, I'm most likely not going to enjoy it. The movie mostly took from the books The Crab with the Golden Claws, The Secret of the Unicorn, and Red Rackham's Treasure, and the story mostly sticks to it very, very closely. The only major difference is that the villain wasn't the villain in the comic book. Sakharine wasn't even a main character. But here in the movie, he's been beefed up to not only the main antagonist, but also as a descendant of Red Rackham.
Show yourself, Red Rackham!
The acting in this movie is absolutely fantastic. Going back to Sakharine, he's played by Daniel Craig, and he's doing a superb job. It might just be me, but his performance is almost unrecognizable and makes for an excellent hateable villain. But of course, the movie stands on the shoulders of the two main leads, Haddock and Tintin, played by Andy Serkis and Jamie Bell. Jamie Bell does a perfect job capturing the adventurous spirit that Tintin had in the comics. Things can get out of hand for him, but you always can tell that he has a backup plan or that he has a lot of street knowledge for his age. By far my favorite character here is Haddock. You know, when he's on screen, he has this commanding presence that just steals everything from the show, no matter what. And I'm glad that they included him in the movie, because there was a period of time where Tintin was kind of a solo adventurer there for a minute in the comics. But Andy Serkis here embodies the character in such a great way, bringing the original panels to life.
Tintin, you're saved. Oh, water! Water!
Stop! Captain! It's just a mirage!
It was here.
The Adventures of Tintin probably has one of the most exciting stories that Spielberg has told on the screen, with some very impressive action set sequences. We already talked about the one-shot take, but seriously, it's just impressive that a scene like this can exist. My other favorite part is when Haddock is recounting the tale of the unicorn and the pirate ship fight is insane in this movie, especially when the two boats get entangled together and the enemy ship literally swings above the other. Spielberg here is at his finest. Even when it comes to the graphics here, they're still phenomenal. The characters aren't stiff like a lot of the previous motion capture films. They're still full of life and they feel like a real person, not a group of pixels. You can see the pores on the faces and even the little fine hairs. It's incredible how this has held up to this day. Tintin, in my opinion, holds up to this day spectacularly, and I consider it one of Steven Spielberg's best directed movies. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's one of the best comic book movies ever made. That being said, it does have one glaring issue, however. The movie was directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by Peter Jackson. This was meant to be the jumping off point of a trilogy with Jackson and Spielberg swapping places. So, The Adventures of Tintin, it ends on a pseudo cliffhanger. It's not bad, it never takes away from the film, but it makes me mad that we never got a sequel to this. This could have been the next Indiana Jones trilogy, but we just ended up with one great movie. If you haven't watched The Adventures of Tintin, I highly implore you to go out and find a copy of it, or to possibly even pore over the original comics that Hergé wrote. If we ever get a sequel in the future, which I really don't think we will, I think this is kind of like an Acceleracers type deal where we're just never going to get a sequel, honestly. But, you know, if we do get a sequel, I will be the first in line to watch it.